During this part of the assessment, I'm going to share a little bit about the theory behind MBTI, or Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, and I'm going to share some information about the preferences within those 4 dichotomies, and you'll have an opportunity to complete a self-assessment. Once I have your self-assessment, which you'll send me by filling out the form underneath this video, I'll send you your computer-generated assessment. So that's the reported type that the computer will generate for you as a result of those 93 questions that you answered. And if there's a difference, we will together review those, and I'll help you figure out what your best fit type is. So that decision is yours. You're going to be the one that decides whether the preference is a fit for you or not. And we can have that discussion once you've completed your self-assessment.
So, so what the Myers-Briggs assessment is assessing is personality and not behavior. So, personality is about the way that we think, feel, and act, and those are the innate ways that we think, feel, and act on most occasions. They are inborn and they endure, and they are the core of who we are. What makes behavior different is that we can change that over time. So they are the way that we might express our personality, but we can also learn to express our personality or express ourselves or behave in different ways depending on uh, experiences that we have or training that we might take or expectations that people might have of us in the workplace, in the family, etc. So, as you may recall, the Myers Briggs assessment is based on the work or the research around personality type and the theory of personality type that Carl Jung developed in the 1920s. And so, what Jung observed is that everyone uses 2 kinds of mental processes. So, there's the taking in and gathering of information, is the first type of mental process. And the second is how we make decisions or how we come to conclusions about that information. And what Jung's theory was is that everyone has a preferred way of using those mental processes. So Jung observed that we all live in 2 worlds. So there's the outer world of people, things, and activities, and there's the inner world of our own ideas, thoughts, and observations. And he believed that everyone had a preference for and is energized by either the outer world or the inner world. So, as I've said before, Jung believed that our preferences are innate, they're inborn. He also recognized that preferences can be shaped by environmental influences such as family, work, expectations. And so that's that nature versus nurture. So, to illustrate the meaning of preferences, here's an activity. So, when I'm finished of this slide, if you would pause, grab a piece of paper and a pen, and write your name. And then put the pen in your other hand and write your name again. And just take a moment to think about what might be some words that describe that experience of the first time you wrote your name and the second time you wrote your name. Typically, people use words like comfortable, natural, and when writing with their preferred hand, and when writing with your opposite hand, often people might use words like awkward or messy. And so that's that's the meaning of preference. So you might be able to teach yourself to write just as well with your left hand as your right hand or vice versa, but there's going to be one that's going to feel natural that you don't have to think about. So that's your preference. So the MBTI theory builds on and expands Jung's theory, And what it does is it describes four pairs of opposite preferences. And just like we may be able to use both our right and our left hands, we use all 8 of these preferences, or both preferences in each pair. We just prefer one more than the other. And the MBTI assessment is designed to indicate what our inborn preferences are. It's not designed to measure our skills or the effect of environment or training. It's just meant to measure our preferences. So the 8 preferences, or the 4 pairs: extroversion, introversion, and that measures the way that you receive energy and that world that you live in. So if you live in the outer world, the inner world, and how you get energy. The sensing or intuitive pairs, that measures how you take in information. Thinking and feeling is the third pair, and that measures how you decide and come to conclusions. And then the last pair, judging or perceiving, those are opposite ways to approach the outside world. So I'm going to talk more about each of those. So remember that this assessment is not a test, it's an indicator. Every choice is normal behavior. So it's not looking at whether or not you are within a normal range. It's all normal. So it's just looking at preference. So there's no right or wrong answers, there's no better or worse types. All types have potential strengths, all types have possible blind spots, and the results are not meant to limit you, not meant to stereotype you. They really are just meant to help you understand yourself and help you understand others that you may be living with, working with. And again, the results are confidential and they belong to you. You may share them if you wish, but I won't be sharing them with anyone but you. So again, the assessment is assessing type, not trait. And the difference is type is about those inborn preferences for directing your energy, how you take in energy, how you use your mind, make decisions. And again, the theory assumes that everyone uses both opposites at different times, but that each person has a preference. Trait, on the other hand, are the behavioral habits or how we might express our preferences. Something that people expect when they get the MBTI results is that they're going to be on some sort of spectrum. And just want to share with you that that is not the way that the MBTI assessment works. When you're assessing type, it is about preference. It's not about spectrum. When you're assessing trait, it's about, there's a place in the middle that's sort of a normal score, and you might score above average or below average. That's not the way it works with Myers-Briggs. You just have one preference or the other. It may be a very clear preference or a slight preference, but it's just about preference. So there's no normal scores. There's no you're really extroverted or you're below average in terms of um, feeling, that sort of thing. It's all normal, and it's just one or the other in terms of preference. So the first pairing or dichotomy that we'll look at is extroversion or introversion. And so you'll remember that those are opposite ways to direct and receive energy. So people who prefer extroversion direct their energy and attention outward. So they focus on the outside world of people and activity. And people who prefer introversion direct their energy and attention inward, and their they focus themselves on their inner world of ideas and experiences. And we do use both preferences, and usually not with equal comfort. So it's that preference piece. So if you have a preference for extroversion, that doesn't mean that there aren't times when you might prefer to focus your attention inside or on your inner world. And likewise, if you prefer introversion, that doesn't mean that you might not be comfortable getting up and leading a meeting. We all use both. So some of the differences: people who prefer extroversion typically would be energized by interacting with others. So you get energy from being with other people. Often are sociable and expressive, prefer to communicate by talking, and work out ideas by talking them through. So thinking out loud is something that people who prefer extroversion might be more likely to do. People who prefer introversion are energized by thinking, by the opportunity to reflect. Oftentimes are private and contained. They may prefer to communicate in writing. And typically, people who prefer introversion like to work out ideas or think or reflect internally. So they work out ideas by reflecting on them before they speak them out into the world. Some further examples: people who prefer extroversion often have broad interests in many things, where people who prefer introversion might focus in depth on a few interests. People who prefer extroversion often learn best by doing or by discussing. And alternatively, people who prefer introversion usually learn best by reflection, thinking things through. Extroverts may be more likely to take initiative in work and relationships, where people who prefer introversion may take initiative selectively, so when the situation or issue is very important to them. So, some key words associated with extroversion: action, outward, people, interaction, many, expressive, do, think, do might be the way that they prefer to move forward in the world. Whereas words associated with introversion are reflection, inward, privacy, concentration, few, quiet, and think, do, think. So I want you to take a moment now and pause the presentation if you need to, and think about what your preference is. Given the choice, and remembering that we all do extroverted and introverted things, but we usually do not do them with equal comfort, and we usually do have a preference for one or the other. Given the choice, which do you prefer, extroversion or introversion? The next dichotomy is focused on how we take in information, and the choices are sensing or intuition. So people who prefer sensing tend to focus on present realities. They like verifiable facts. They trust experience. And people who prefer intuition, they focus on future possibilities, are big picture thinkers, and they trust their insight, they trust their intuition. And again, we use both, and we typically prefer and trust one more than the other. So let's look at some differences. People who prefer sensing focus on what is real and actual, compared to people who prefer intuition focus on patterns and meanings. Those who prefer sensing, they are good at remembering specifics, and that's what they observe, whereas people who prefer intuition, they are more likely to remember specifics when they can relate them to a pattern. Again, people who prefer sensing trust experience. People who prefer intuition trust inspiration. Those who prefer sensing build carefully and thoroughly toward conclusions, whereas people who prefer intuition move quickly and they follow hunches. Sensing is about understanding ideas and theories by applying them, so practical application, whereas people who prefer intuition, they want to clarify ideas and theories before they put them into practice. So some of the keywords associated with sensing and intuition. So it's facts versus ideas, realistic versus imaginative, specific versus general, present versus future, keep versus change, practical versus theoretical, what is, what could be. So take a moment to think about what your preference might be. Again, we use both, but we don't necessarily or usually use them with equal trust. So, which of sensing or intuition do you believe you have a preference for? So, the next dichotomy is thinking or feeling, and they focus on how you come to conclusions or how you make decisions. So some of the differences, people who prefer thinking like to decide things logically. So they look at the logical consequences of the choice or action. And people who prefer feeling prefer to decide things by considering what's important to them and those involved. So people who prefer thinking, it's about logical decision making. People who prefer So some of the differences between thinking and feeling. People who prefer thinking tend to step back to get an objective view, and people who prefer feeling step in to identify with those involved. Thinking is about analyzing, feeling is about empathizing. People who prefer thinking use cause and effect reasoning, and those who prefer feeling are guided more by personal and social values. Those on the thinking side solve problems with logic, and those who prefer feeling assess the impacts of decisions on people. Some further differences in how people make decisions. So people who prefer thinking, they strive for that objective standard of proof or of truth. And people who prefer feeling are looking for understanding, for harmony, for positive interactions. On the thinking side, it's about being reasonable. On the feeling side, it's about being compassionate. People who prefer thinking can be tough-minded. People who prefer feeling may appear tender-hearted. People who prefer thinking are fair and they want people to be treated equally. And on the flip side, on the feeling side, also fair, but want everyone to be treated as an individual. So some of those key words associated with this dichotomy. So head versus heart, detached versus personal, things compared to people, objective versus subjective, critique versus praise, analyze versus understand. On the thinking side, firm but fair. On the feeling side, merciful. So it's time now to take a moment and think about your preference. So given the choice, which do you prefer, thinking or feeling? So let's move now to the dichotomy that focuses on how we approach the outside world. So that's judging or perceiving, J or P. So some of the differences between judging and perceiving, or people who prefer judging, people who prefer perceiving. So on the judging side, they want the external world to be organized and orderly, whereas those who prefer perceiving, they want to experience the world, not organize it. People who prefer judging, they look at the world and they see the decisions that need to be made. So they can actually order, they can look to see like what are the problems that need to be solved. Whereas people who prefer perceiving, they look at the world and they see options that need to be explored. So some other differences on the judging side, scheduled; on the perceiving side, spontaneous. People who prefer judging organize their lives. Perceiving, it's more about being flexible. Judging is systematic versus perceiving, which is casual. Methodical versus open-ended. So those who prefer judging, they make short and long-term plans. And those who prefer perceiving, they like to be adaptable. They like to be able to change course. Those who prefer judging, they want to have things decided. And on the opposite side, those who prefer perceiving, they like things loose. They want to keep things flexible so that they can be open to change. Judgers, they do not want last minute stress. They try to avoid that. People who prefer perceiving find those last minute pressures to be energizing. So some of the key words associated with J and P: organized versus flexible, decision versus information, control versus experience, now versus later, closure versus options, deliberate compared to spontaneous, plan compared to wait. So, given that information and given the choice, which is your preference, judging or perceiving? So when you combine those 4 letters that you chose, that indicates your personality type. And there are 16 possible combinations of those 4 letters.
So during this part of the assessment, you had an opportunity to look at the 4 dichotomies and choose your preferences within each. And so in doing that, you have completed the self-assessment. When you finish this video, if you would go to the form underneath it and put those 4 letters into that homework form for me and send that along to me. Your reported type is the computer-generated assessment of the 93 questions that you answered. So once you've completed that form and submitted it to me, I will send you your reported type, and then when we next talk, we'll compare the two and see if there's anything that's different. And if there is, I'll help you figure out what your best fit type is.